Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Whether you're joining us on the radio side, the TV side, through the live stream services, we are glad that you're here. Without further ado, let's dive into a boatload of news. And no pun intended, because 20 Marines and an entire naval support group are closing in on the Strait of Hormuz. So, as you recall, after the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding and Friendship and Hugs, the United States kind of sort of temporarily ended its blockade on the strait and allowed a lot of Iranian ships just stuffed to the tippy top with oil to leave the Strait of Hormuz, to leave the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and then sailed off to China, where all of them still sit because China, while it definitely needs to refuel its petroleum reserves, also isn't going to pay Iran full price for that oil. Those ships are stranded there, as humorous as it may be for a ship full of oil to be stranded. In the meantime, after a lot of back and forth in the last couple of days, the Iranian regime has not landed a single confirmed hit in any of their counterstrikes on United States targets, on Bahrainian, Jordanian, on the UAE, on Kuwaiti, Saudi Arabian, or Qatari defensive groups. So the United States has pounded not only the shoreline of the Strait of Hormuz and all of the various islands, and then pounded about 50 to 150 miles inward. Now up to 300 to 400 miles inward, we've seen targeted strikes, a military rail line that allowed supplies to be shipped in from Russia and China, ethnic conflict stirring up in eastern Iran near the border of Turkmenistan because the IRGC had to be diverted from keeping those groups in line to help out the rest of the country. In western Iran, in the mountains, there are individuals that are getting much more nervous that the Kurds are going to pick up the rifles and pull that fancy little curved piece of metal called a trigger. And so what's going on elsewhere? Well, boy, howdy, there are some ships on the horizon, and there seem to be some boys that are singing that Marine anthem that just so happens to mention the shores of Islamic regimes, from Tripoli at our nation's founding all the way over to today. Now, here's why this is interesting. According to a Newsmax report today, I think Newsmax is more featured in reporting today than probably any time so far with our show's work. The USS Boxer and the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked with it were temporarily sidelined during the opening weeks of the conflict with Iran after an engine cooling system failure forced the amphibious assault ship to divert to the island Diego Garcia for repairs. However, now, the renewed U.S. operations in Middle East sees the Boxer Assault Group moving in to support directly military operations. Now, why does this matter? At the exact same time, two things have happened. Number one, a big series of sanctions that we're going to get into in just a second. But first, the United States, i.e. officials have said the president has demanded two promises by tomorrow. And I don't mean like by tomorrow after breakfast, after lunch, after a siesta, like by the calendar date tomorrow. Demands that the Iranians proclaim from Tehran two things. Number one, the Strait of Hormuz will remain open. And number two, Tehran pinky promises not to attack ships anymore. You say, but they've been demanding promises and claims and deals for ages. Why is this different? This is not saying, hey, you need to sign on to this and give us your nuclear dust and we'll engage in friendly conversations and that J.D. Vance guy's going to come over and talk a little bit with you in Qatar. No, not in this case. The United States is saying, proclaim that these two things are true because we know you can't fulfill them. Also, hey, check out that group of Marines on the horizon that are getting closer and they're eating crayons faster and their rifles and guns are moving a little bit closer than is rather comfortable for certain groups. We'll get into some of why the United States doesn't believe that Tehran is going to be able to hold anyone from attacking ships anymore in a couple of seconds, because there are new sanctions also being announced. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, announced sanctions on Ali Ansari. That's a Dubai-based Iranian banker and businessman. So remember how I told you that the Indian crew was not exactly worth a whole lot of super duper help? Well, the Indian crew with their navy was also sheltering a couple of connections to Ali Ansari. And this Iranian banker and businessman who had been described as a key financier for Iran's supreme leader Muqtada Khamenei, who still no one has seen to this date. Victoria Coates of the Heritage Foundation and I were talking about that on network television today. We have no idea where he is. There's not been any audio. There's not been any video. There haven't been any grinder dates pulling up to the cave. No one's seen him. So this Ali Ansari guy has been accused of diverting public funds into overseas real estate and commercial holdings via entities like Smart Global Limited to benefit the Iranian regime. Now, Ansari previously owned the now defunct Ayande Bank, but there were still some Indian national holdings that he had access to. Now, no longer. 13 other individuals and entities, including Iranian currency exchange houses, a lot of cryptocurrency exchange operations, foreign front companies in Hong Kong and the UAE, are now being seized and sanctions are being placed on them. That's a big deal because this coincides with what we talked about earlier this week. The FBI seizing a lot of cryptocurrency hackers here in the United States who are not only competing and participating in intelligence operations that involve everything from just holding individuals ransom via their data and just outright hacking into areas and using kind of as a soft money laundering front for dark market cryptocurrency exchanges that would eventually funnel money through China and then to Iran. Well, putting UAE aside for just a second, Iran is panicking. Iran is absolutely panicking. Why? Because now Iranian officials are stating that they haven't been firing at the ships at all. They didn't fire at the Qatari ship and the Saudi Arabian ship and the third ship of unknown origin. In fact, what they're now saying is they're rogue elements. For the first time from the Iranian regime and state media, they're now claiming that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has fractured into 2 or more factions. What bearded, handsome Hoosier has been telling you for at least the last 3 weeks that they have lost key parts of control with the IRGC along the Strait of Hormuz? And some of those groups, some of those same people who were shouting shame and dishonor in the streets at Foreign Minister Arachi over the last couple of days are no longer taking any kind of instructions from Tehran, because religious fundamentalists of the Islamic faith do not take orders from those who moderate. They only take orders from those who encourage them to rape, kill, plunder, and the other various accoutrements that you're very familiar with by now. Also, they're struggling because they are losing any possible leverage they had over oil prices. Here we are. We are in yet another series of strikes, and the gas prices are not skyrocketing like they did last time. And Iran can't even sell the oil that it's getting out of the Strait of Hormuz. Other countries aren't panicking. Even Iraq is now wishy-washy on whether or not it's going to stay in the Strait of Hormuz, whether it's going to stay in OPEC. Eat your heart out, Saddam. All right? It's really incredible right now to watch the entire structure that was built about in the second half of the 20th century to keep the United States on a leash for the oil market crumbling in real time. The Iranians are panicking. They're not able to hold anyone accountable in the Strait of Hormuz. They can't keep the ethnic groups in Western Iran behaving and not going on essentially cavalry raids into Turkmenistan. Pakistan, Qatar, they're having no hope whatsoever. Nothing is working. The strongly worded letters from the Chinese-owned Pakistanis are doing nothing. So what do they have? What's going on? In a panic, Iranians are just trying in however manner they can to get at the nuclear sites. Now, there's some CNN footage, satellite footage that's recently been released because several of the companies which do some kind of geolocation satellite tracking have been encouraged by the United States and other groups in the Gulf states to not post as many pictures from their fancy-dancy satellites. Now, CNN is saying that Iran is getting everyone and their 12-year-old brother out with shovels to try to clean out some of this nuclear material that might still remain.
This image, one of several shared exclusively with CNN, may show signs of Iran attempting to rebuild its nuclear facilities. This is one of several locations across the country where we've identified recent activity, both at nuclear and missile sites.
So to be clear, when they say that they're attempting to rebuild their nuclear facilities, what you are seeing here, and as someone who has a good amount of experience actually reading satellite photography imagery and grainy CCTV, very zoomed in camera imagery, I better be really careful here, that they're not rebuilding structures. They're not clearing away and doing gravitational. They are doing emergency excavation. There are no cranes being set up and, all right, go ahead and put this beam over there and line it up just right. Like that, no one's doing that. They're not getting out that excellent put it up in a day Hispanic crew or the Amish crew to get together and out there and start slapping up drywall. That ain't happening, Habibi. Radio crew, we're going to send you guys to the commercial break. Try not to unearth any uranium dust while we're gone. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We're going to continue with the live stream. All right, while that radio crew is away, I believe that we're talking about exclusive satellite imagery.
The activity in nuclear sites in particular raises questions as to whether Iran violated the Memorandum of Understanding.
Now that's freaking hilarious. Both sides have violated the MOU because the MOU was a joke. Again, Trump said the ceasefire is over. Everyone from here to Saskatoon has said quite clearly the MOU is M-over. It's done.
Signed with the US in late June, even before President Trump seemed to signal its end this week. So for weeks, we've only got glimpses of what's been happening inside Iran.
Crazy how terrorist regimes are like that.
Providers have been withholding access to satellite imagery across the region.
Now, the reason for that actual satellite imagery being withheld is some are getting out there and saying, what does the United States not want us to know about what's happening inside Iran? Are they trying to cover up that the nuclear sites weren't destroyed? No, sweetie, honey, baby. See, we have these things called boats. And it turns out that if you pan the satellite camera over boats, you can get a really good look at some of the things on the decks of those boats. For example, if there are Marines that are practicing, let's call them future disembarkment procedures. We really don't want everyone knowing that the Marines are practicing certain ways and means of finding their way onto Karg Island-related beaches. Now, that brings us over to kind of one final update before I get to the good stuff, because I've mentioned the UAE a couple of times here. I've mentioned some sanctions relief, and there's a little extra good stuff that I've also been kind of predicting for a couple of months now. The presidential office, Trump administration, has said now, according to a couple of sources on the matter, that if Iran were to succeed in assassinating him, and yesterday we talked about the $100 million bounty where ladies were doing kind of the I don't quite know what you would call it. The Islamic car wash, or the wrestler ladies holding up the round cards kind of a thing, like the ladies are holding up the Kill Trump sign, like you're announcing the next round of boxing, but just with a lot less exposed skin. Like $100 million to kill Trump, Netanyahu, Pete Hegseth, General Dan Kane, that kind of a thing. Trump said if they end up getting away with it, bomb them to hell and God, just bomb the out of them. That's the president's remarks to that. All right. Finally, that brings us to the United Arab Emirates. I told y'all months ago that one of the greatest things the president of the United States was doing amid all of the Iran shenanigans was reshoring the world away from either the Iranian kind of Islamic alliance, the soft brotherhood axis of Muslims around the Middle East, where they all stick together because after all, we're all Muslims, aren't we? That kind of thing. When like the nation of Qatar or Kuwait or Bahrain will say, to my Muslim brothers over in, and then they'll name the other country. President Trump has undermined that pretty consistently and pretty effectively. Not only by getting the UAE to leave OPEC, not only by allowing Saudis more access to various things in the Middle East, getting Qatar and the Jordanians, as well as Lebanon away from various things, but also, of course, with China. And, of course, sending Pete Hegseth over to Malaysia and Indonesia to kind of block China from moving into territorial waters there. That's why China's currently trying to poke the Philippines. That's not going to go very well. In the UAE's case, today, the U.S. upgraded the UAE's status under the Export Administration Regulations. What is that, you might ask? This is essentially how good of friends are you to the United States. They removed the UAE from country groups D3 and D4, which impose stricter controls on certain destinations due to national security or proliferation concerns. Essentially saying we really don't have a lot of worries at the moment that the UAE is suddenly going to screw us over, and then added the UAE to country group A5. That's a more favorable group for trusted partners and allies. And again, that's a very, very good thing for not just the UAE, obviously, but for us. Now, this involves advanced computing technologies, defense items, commercial satellites, and a few other things. All right, our radio crew is just now joining us back here on the Tony Kinnett Cast from the commercial break. Why do we care if the UAE is suddenly getting all of this nice commercial access and stuff? What's this all about? Well, it's about two things. See, you know how a lot of people have complained for a very, very long time that we've had this special relationship with Israel in which the United States and Israel share a couple of things, and the U.S. gets like increased intelligence access to the region and also gets a special favored trade status in Israel, things like that. Well, the United States, during the opening ages of this conflict, President Trump said that he was interested in creating a base of operations in the Middle East that didn't involve either the U.S. owning territory or relying solely on Israel. And so, in doing so, settled his eyes on this little place called the UAE. The United Arab Emirates is situated on the Strait of Hormuz. Sorry, I'm giving the game away here. Right between Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. And while Oman currently, foreshadowing, owns that little tip of land right up there on the Strait of Hormuz, the United Arab Emirates has all of that important coastline right now. And you may remember that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced, and there was like some initial coverage, and then no one ever mentioned it again, this fancy little thing called the red, white, and blue dome, United States infrastructure along the Strait of Hormuz. Here was the Secretary of War talking about this earlier in the conflict.
All of these ships from all around the world want to get out of the Iranian trap that they have been stuck inside.
This was before the UAE announced it was leaving OPEC, by the way.
As a direct gift from the United States to the world, we have established a powerful red, white, and blue dome over the strait.
Now, where is that? What do you mean? Because he kind of recognizes what he's saying here. He then moves to saying, well, we have ships and fighter jets. The UAE has become the place for the United States to establish, first of all, a test run of the Golden Dome that Trump wants upgraded missile defense systems that don't just rely on Aegis destroyers and the well-placed THAAD missile battery here and there at U.S. airports and on the coastline. The United States is establishing a test run of the future Golden Dome system in the UAE right now. And did I check to make sure I was cleared to say that? You're gosh darn right I did. The UAE gambit by the Trump administration may be one of the greatest diplomatic maneuvers of a century's worth of work. Really. And I'm not just talking about, rich dudes in fancy white robes in the Emirates and tall buildings. Absolutely not. What's being done right now is creating a permanent future outpost for the United States that doesn't rely on Tucker Carlson laughing about the Jews in Israel. He's a little distracted with Graham Platner, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But the United States is taking a severe look at what the Iranians are doing. Trump's patience appears to have run out, and then some. And if the United States uses the UAE as a staging ground to keep an eye on Karg Island, perhaps, and Saudi Arabia and Oman are, well, Oman's not really going to do a whole lot, and that's another topic for another time, but the Saudis, the Qatar, the Bahrainians act to finally remove some of these islands and get some things settled once and for all. If that happens near the beginning of Q3, that's going to change things entirely for the entire Trump administration. It truly will be a groundbreaking moment if it happens. If it happens. Now, there's some more stuff we'll talk about with Marco Rubio here in a little bit regarding 60 nations at a conference with Antifa. But before we get to that, I told you yesterday that there was another group attempting to work with the Iranians. The Iranian ambassador to the United Nations was reached out to by none other than good old hip and happening Zoran Mamdani's office. And this creates a couple of problems. And a couple of problems for a couple of reasons. So we're going to get into a little bit of a look through on this. The City Journal, a project of the Manhattan Institute, reported that there were more than a few concerns with Mamdani's office, who had already attempted to reach out to the former Colombian president when he was going to make his way to the United States. His visa was denied. Essentially, Mamdani's office wanted to just communicate with all of these leaders who are acting against the interests of the United States. And as soon as the State Department heard about this, they said, you are not allowed to in an official capacity business or personal capacity business, reach out to Iranian officials and try to broker some kind of deal with the United States. At the best of times, that violates a ton of OFAC and foreign regulation controls. At the worst of times, that's the treason kind of treason. So Mamdani was asked about this today, and you can see how quickly he pivots to a kind of pre-written response.
My question for you is, recent reporting showed that the International Affairs Commissioner, Ana Maria Archila, was trying to meet with Iran's ambassador. Thoughts on her coordinating that meeting without your awareness? Also, what do you see Archila's role as the Commissioner of International Affairs? Is she supposed to be making these types of foreign policy, I guess, decisions behind your back? I mean, your reaction to that. And also,
by the way, if you're a reporter, I cannot stress enough how much I despise, truly and deeply despise, two-part questions. Ask the question, and whatever you do, don't do what she does, because he's about to answer and he looks nervous. Look at the man. It's deer in the headlights moments, because this is some straight up accountability stuff. And then she's like, also, what do you think of like Graham Platner? Do you think he's cute? Do you think like his video was interesting? She wrecks her own thing and gives him time to answer, by the way.
Sorry. Did you see the Graham Platner video and your thoughts on that?
I haven't seen the video.
He looks so relieved to get a second to say, oh, I haven't seen the video, because of course, you and I both know that he has. Come on. Everyone watched that when it came out. Everyone did, especially his allies. But anywho, he's going to have to skirt past that and give himself enough time to answer the question about, again, a member of his office reaching out to Iran to try to negotiate or talk about something behind the State Department's back.
I want to be clear on your first question. That meeting did not take place. It will not take place. And I did not know about it until there was a press inquiry regarding it.
Uh-huh. It did not take place. Correct, because the State Department intervened and said, that's illegal. I mean, the State Department swooped in and said, nope, I don't think so. Saying, oh, and then I love the pre-written line that comes out as though he memorized it, because he did. It's like, I had no knowledge of this until the press inquiry was made to my office. Uh-huh, sure. Yes, very. We all know that you've never been like pro the Islamic regime in Iran, and that you've certainly never said that the United States needs to drop any kind of military action, and that you've certainly never expressed, we know for a fact, you've never expressed dismay at the 40,000 who were killed in Iran by their own regime. Yes,
And when it comes to the work of our commissioner and our international affairs office, it's to ensure that as we are a city of the world, that we are also there to meet with leaders from across the world. The focus is always on our city. And
by the way, it's not even entirely clear if the existence of that office for New York City is constitutional. The founding fathers were pretty clear. Again, Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, they agreed on about 0 things, but of the few things that they agreed on, that there was no question on in George Washington's first constitutional administration, it was made explicitly clear that no state or principality was to broker individualized deals with another polity. You are not allowed to do it. That's not a thing. The President of the United States and his Secretary of State dictate foreign policy in this country, and then Congress ratifies it. New York City does not get to do a little backhand room shake with whoever it thinks so just because there's a group of X, Y, and Z in little Bangladesh. Like, no, not a thing. Radio crew, we're going to send you to the commercial. Try not to broker any illegal foreign deals while we're gone. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We're going to continue here on the live stream. So, Mamdani's nonsense aside, there's a little bit more we'll talk about with Rubio here in just a bit, because he's targeting Antifa with a 60-nation conference. The Washington Post is very upset about it. I actually have a new piece out in the Daily Wire about that today. Nick Shirley, however, he's got some breaking stuff happening in New York City. And I want to share this with you right now, because you were told none of this fraud was happening in Minnesota, that Shirley didn't actually expose anything. You were told, I was told, that when Nick Shirley went around filming all of these daycare centers that were mysteriously empty of children, and that there was no signage and it was all misspelled and they were taking millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, he was just, looking for clicks. He didn't get anything proved. That's ridiculous. Well, Nick Shirley just so happens, after traversing the wonderful burned out landscape of California, made his way through Ohio and finally to the Big Apple itself. You know, where Zoran Mamdani has his wonderful maps of the world and the little tiny foreign wonders inside the city. And in his new documentary, alongside with Dr. Oz of the Trump administration, he released this trailer on a 50-minute expose of, I know you're going to be shocked, I know you're not going to believe it, more daycare fraud happening right in Zoran Mamdani's sanctuary city. Here you go.
New York is so gay.
Oh, sorry, wait, that's not the right one. I'm sorry, I got surprised by the priorities. New York being gay. It's very, 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 very important. I think we have it. I think we have it ready to go here. Yes, we do. Here you go.
Like $12.9 million on 7,000 patients, and you say there's not 7,000 patients. Are you committing fraud? Does this daycare pay you to come here? You just said yes. Here, 3 durable medical equipment companies were launched, and so we're wondering, like, where's the equipment at? Our tax dollars are paying for old people to do Tai Chi here inside of New York.
So you might wonder, is that the best use of dollars, or are we better off paying for life-saving treatments in hospitals?
One of the largest fraud schemes in America is taking place in New York City, as billions of dollars is being defrauded by organized Korean and Chinese mafias, along with other foreigners operating and stealing taxpayer dollars. They are using the elderly and the needy to bill the United States government billions of dollars at your expense.
So remember when we were talking about some of the socialist candidates in Colorado? I know this is a very strange segue here, but follow with me here. I promise it's going somewhere. There was this conversation about we need free early childhood care for all. That unlike other democratic socialists that are running around the country and saying we need free Medicare and free housing free healthcare and free housing and universal this and that and a workers' bill of rights. That's just nationalization and collectivization. But they also in Colorado have been talking about the need for completely federally funded, state-funded, early childhood care. And I told you at the time that that was a very bad thing. It doesn't work. How does that actually function, though? Well, here's what you do. You say, I'm taking care of X amount of children. And then you just write that bill. You just write an invoice to the state of Colorado. And Colorado just rubber stamps it and goes, okay, here's your money. And in the federal system, and again, Mamdani's talked about this in New York, whether you are taking care like of the elderly, like in-home nursing home care, he wants you to be able to do the exact same thing. So whether you are saying, I'm running a daycare, wink, or I'm running a nursing home, wink, that's what Shirley's going around and looking at. We saw the same thing with the investigation with Parker Thayer and, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. His investigations over at the Daily Wire are excellent. It'll pop into my mind, I'm sure. This is happening all over the country because when you turn federal dollars in for everybody, you get fraud for everybody. Just that simple. Radio crew, welcome back from the commercial break. Nick Shirley diving into this fraud situation in New York City. There's one other clip we're going to show you. We're going to link this entire documentary from Nick Shirley in the description so that you guys can go see it because it's 50 minutes long. I haven't had a chance to watch all of it yet, but I have seen a couple of clips from it. It is salacious. Here you go.
The day Nick Shirley shows up to have an annual checkup, the odds of that happening are very, very slim.
So the way that Mamdani would say, the way that even previous administrations, like Joe Biden's administration, would say that these businesses, these various daycares or adult daycares, like for the elderly, that the reason that they are or the method of accountability, when you ask about them, they'll say, well, we have auditors that go around and check concerns. So he starts out by pointing out that it is very, very unlikely. You have like a 0.7% chance of ever being visited by an auditor because that's how many of these fraudulent businesses there are.
The day Nick Shirley shows up to have an annual checkup, the odds of that happening are very, very slim. So you guys received $5.5 million in 2025, and your peak day, you guys have...
So they're like panicking because he's asking them about the money that they're receiving. And so he's like, quick, come back inside. Don't talk to him. Don't talk to me. Don't say anything at all. By the way, the other investigator's name I was forgetting over at the Daily Wire is Luke Rosiak, Rosiak. So they start panicking. Oh, wait, come back inside.
341.
Escape.
Yeah, right here. So how come one day you guys had 300?
So he's telling her to leave. And she says, no, it's okay. I'll interview. I'll talk to him. What could happen?
348 beneficiaries.
No, I didn't answer. Can you give me permit?
We don't need a permit to film.
So she's like, I'll come in and said, oh, no, I'm not answering any questions. Where's your permit? He's like, we don't need a permit to film. And I want to make this clear for just everyone out there. There are a lot of videos that are circulating social media where like people are walking up to those who are filming in public, on public streets, on publicly accessible sidewalks. And people are coming up and saying, you don't have a right to film me. I have to give you my consent for you to film me. That's not a thing, guys. That's not a law. There is no law. It's the same as people said, I don't give Facebook permission to share my photo. That's not a thing. Don't rely on people who believe that you have to have some kind of special permit to be filmed or spoken to by a journalist. Your best, if you are her, you goofed the moment that you agreed to take any questions at all. Also, this is why you should speak English, so that you can recognize when hearing someone's first questions what they're up to. Not to, give advice to those who might be permitting or participating in a ton of fraud, but,
But do you think there is fraud taking place here inside some of these daycares, ma'am?
Cricket.
Can you give me your ID? Everybody,
Can you give me your ID?
Yes, sir.
Give me your ID.
Yeah. Okay. So give each other your IDs then. Give her your ID.
So it's going swimmingly. Now let me give you some of the details here. Nick Shirley visited multiple facilities receiving massive public funding and highlighted discrepancies suggesting that there may be ghost beneficiaries, inflated claims, we're going to get to that in a second, and the misuse of taxpayer dollars. All of that. Remember the whole waste, fraud, and abuse thing that you were told didn't exist when Doge was looking through things? There's no waste, fraud, and abuse, and if it is happening, it's very small and it's very rare. And it's probably good that it's happening, that kind of thing. One daycare reportedly received $5.5 million while only claiming 341 to 348 beneficiaries. What does that mean? They're receiving way too much money for only having 341 people that supposedly go there. An adult daycare received $12.9 million, but had far fewer actual members than the 7,900 that it claimed, 7,899. The adult daycare claimed and therefore got $12.9 million. So by the way, if you do the math and you cut that number in roughly half, that means that that one daycare that received 5.5 million should have been reporting around 3,000 beneficiaries. They had 1/10 of that. That's the kind of rough math that should be going in there. Staff at several of the sites refused to answer questions, provide ID, or allow entry. Some of these facilities appeared underutilized or just empty. So basically you have an adult daycare center in one of these situations they showed up to, and it's just an empty warehouse that like Amazon may have used once, possibly, maybe, no one has any idea. And of course, this is my favorite, there are a bunch of luxury vehicles like Range Rovers parked outside of the facilities. So these are supposed to be facilities like funded by public money, and there's no one in there, and the staff at the place happen to be driving Range Rovers parked outside. Incredible. Broader claims of over $190 million in alleged fraud across adult and home care scams in the New York City area involving home care agencies and similar operations. And as we talked about with Luke Rosiak here on the Tony Kinnett Cast, if you go out to Ohio and you go through a lot of buildings where you have these home care agencies where there's like 300 federally or state-funded home care agencies in these empty office park buildings, across the hall, or even at the same address, owned by the same person who owns one of the home care agencies, will also be a shell trucking company that's fraudulent and shouldn't exist. Excellent. Excellent indeed. Now, by the way, you may remember that Nick Shirley was told, and you and I were told, that he didn't actually expose anything when he was in, Minnesota, for example. And you remember videos where he was going around talking to people like, what's one of those ladies' name? Well, let's see if one of these individuals pops up in the older Nick Shirley video here.
Here at Future Leaders Early Learning Center, this building received over $3 million. Hello, how are you?
He goes up to this one lady, and anyway, introducing Fahima Mahmoud. He goes up and says, hey, who do you have going on? What's going on in this daycare center? There's nobody here. And can I sign my kid up to be in this daycare center?
I would like to see if I could bring little Joey, my son, little Joey here. Is there paperwork, or can I check out the daycare? No.
No. Gee, wait, a daycare that's not accepting any applicant? There's like nobody in there? Man, this is kind of weird, Fahima Mahmoud. Again, remember, Nick Shirley said that he was harassing all these people. California, the state of California, the Democrats in their state assembly introduced a bill specifically to block Nick Shirley types from asking any questions after they saw this stuff.
Why can't I check out the daycare?
Americans not here.
Okay, but if I can't get paperwork or anything to submit my son, little Joey, to come in here to daycare? We'd really like to put Joey in this daycare. We've heard great things.
Business card?
No, I would like your business card, actually.
Yeah, because when you're a parent, when you go to look at like a daycare for your kids, what you do is you bring business cards. Ah, yes. Incredible. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I forgot the most important part about, again, Miss Fahima Mahmoud. She has now pled guilty to $3.7 million. $3.7 million in fraud.
5 months after she shut down her daycare, booked a flight.
By the way, you always love that, like, the fact that they get to wear like the full extra super duper body covering thing is so that you can't see her face as she walks in shame. A little fun fact here.
5 months after she shut down her daycare, booked a flight to London and was arrested by the FBI.
Oh, she tried to flee to Londonistan. Oh.
Mahmoud, are you here to plead guilty today?
50-year-old Fahima Mahmoud admits she committed daycare fraud.
Wow. Just incredible. I can't believe it. Nick Shirley didn't notice anything. I mean, amazing. Again, you would think, remember they said that the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, that it had already done the work, and they had covered some fraud and some concerns ages ago. But I don't remember the Minneapolis Star-Tribune having people like actually going through the community and talking to individuals like this one. That was Nick Shirley who did that. Wow, just strange, isn't it? Curious, ain't it? Sure is interesting. Now, speaking of fraud, I wanted to get a chance to talk to you about Graham Platner of Maine's Big Exit, because today, I know there were a lot of other kind of conservative commentators and others out there in the media who said they didn't think that Platner was actually going to drop out. I thought that was a little strange. I thought, well, I mean, he's clearly cooked. I don't see how he could stay in the race at all at this point. Well, good old Graham Platner today finally has released his I'm dropping out, I'm extra done, I'm stepping out of the race business letter. And don't let the fancy letterhead and kind of the modern letter style fool you. This is a toddler temper tantrum wrapped up in a letter. Because now people are digging through even more of his records while he's still an active candidate, and you can still access some of those records. And it appears that Graham Platner also may have committed fraud. I know yesterday we talked about the Bernie Sanders pick, the ex-mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, who just pled guilty to charges of bribery. But now you've got the other major Bernie pick, with his exciting possible concerns of fraud. We'll get into that in just a second here. Before the radio crew has to head to their last commercial break, I wanted to let him in on this. To whom it may concern, starting off strong, because he knows exactly to whom it's concerning, because it's to the Maine Department of the Secretary of State. So what you do there is you address it to Mr. or Ms. Secretary. It's kind of cool. You don't have to go to the Somali Leering Center to pick that one up. Quote, I write to formally withdraw my candidacy for the United States Senate. On June 9th, 156,084 Mainers voted for a new kind of politics. Wow. One that is representative of people down here in the real world, not billionaires, oligarchs, or the political establishment. All right, radio crew, we do have to send you to that commercial break. We're going to continue on the live stream because this temper tantrum's too good to miss. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So remember him like saying that this is about real people in the real world. Like he's just a working class oyster farmer like everyone else. No, we'll get into that. Anyway, he said Mainers voted for Medicare for all. There it is. Just Medicare. I just wanted free health care. And to ban billionaires from buying elections. Well, not like J.B. Pritzker or Tom Steyer or, Again, you know, the super duper ultra union pack spending billions and billions and billions wherever they tell those funds to go, or, you know, Alex Soros. Oh, no, those billionaires are fine. Anyway, from buying elections and for an end to taxpayer-funded genocide and forever wars. You can tell that he hates wars because after he got home from Iraq and his multiple tours of duty he signed up for, he then faked PTSD to get benefits and then turned around and went to work for Blackwater, the worst and cheapest mercenary company of them all. You know, that's how you can tell he hates war, because he went to work for a mercenary company. Anyway, they voted for time and dignity, sure, Bob, for strong unions and jobs they can raise families on and then cheat on with a bunch of ladies, you know? Yeah, you know? Anyway, and for the hope of buying a home, for the chance to retire with grace. People are desperate for change, for this broken system to be righted, for the American experiment to be furthered. Over the past 11 months, remember that, thousands and thousands of Mainers poured out their hearts, time, and talent into a movement to deliver that vision. I will be forever grateful to them. And in submitting this letter today, I seek to further the movement we have built together and the future we believe in. It reads like a really lame high school valedictorian speech. I will never forget the time that Mr. Thompson said Janice was ugly and we laughed for days and days. These are the days of our lives. Anyway, quote, my name may have been on the ballot, but that ballot line belongs to the people of Maine. As such, please consider this notice as my official withdrawal for consideration for this office. F ICE, Free Palestine, up the hearts. Up the hearts. Okay. Solidarity forever. Gay. Graham Platner. There's solidarity. Got to get the democratic socialism line in there. So throws his little fit. F ICE, Free Palestine, and up the hearts. Does anyone know what up the hearts means? I don't know. Up the hearts. Exciting. And down with cholesterol. Thank you, Graham. That's really wonderful. Now over to the extra stuff that's problematic. So I've already told you about being investigated by state and federal sources for some rather serious and concerning problems. But also, it so happens that he may have kind of lied about his primary sources of income and things. See, he's getting $57,600 for VA disability, which again, it appears that he faked because he then turned around and went to work for Blackwater. Yikes and a half. And then only $5,001 from oyster farming and $3,000 to be a harbor master. Again, his oyster farming, that's money that his mommy paid him. Because, you know, she was the only person who bought oysters for her restaurant that he didn't even make enough oysters for. Radio crew, welcome back to the commercial, or welcome back from the commercial break. I did tell you, and I remember saying to the radio crew before I sent you off to that commercial land, that's 11 months ago. Man, 11 months of a campaign. So wonderful. There's a little issue for that, and I'd like it to come from the mouth of the Washington Post. The Washington Post Washington Post editor over on CNN, because, you know, all of these scandals really started getting media attention, aggressive media attention, in the last couple of months. Well, listen to what this Washington Post editor has to say.
It's not as if we went into this without any red flags. We knew Graham Platner was a liability since literally October.
Hang on there. October, you say? Why? Hey, Google, how long has it been since October 10th? It's been 9 months. Thanks, Google. Huh. You mean for 9 of those 11 months, you guys have known about these kinds of things? Why, gee willikers, how surprising.
And so for Democrats right now acting as if this is new information, and look, the rape allegation is horrific. It is disqualifying, but there's been a lot of disqualifying factors. And what was really upsetting following this race throughout was that instead of answering for a lot of these disqualifying factors, they were instead turned into something, this sort of redemption arc, and framed as relatable and relatable for working class Mainers.
Now, but to be fair to Karine here, she is an opinion journalist for the opinion section, And she joined the Post back in 2025 after being a columnist and an editorial board member at the Boston Globe. She's a Harvard grad. I do think that it is kind of funny. Like it is worth a good hoot. I scrolled all the way back through her articles back to last year in October, because again, she's saying, well, we've known about this for ages and ages and ages and ages. So after looking all the way back to her stuff, am I seeing anything regarding Graham Platner, Kristi Noem, Iran war, tariff stuff, Gavin Newsom? I'm looking for all of the Graham Platner articles, and I'm not finding them. So if I knew that somebody had all of this baggage, and I wasn't saying it, I don't really know that you have the opportunity you think you do to come out and kind of brag about this. But it's worse because, again, the New York Times had buried all of the horrible stuff that Graham Platner had done in Lindsay Fifield's testimony, 17 paragraphs down, said very spuriously from an editorial perspective that they weren't able to corroborate or hear from anyone else. They literally chose not to ask or air other comments from people around Fifield. And Ray Sicott, the other young lady who would eventually come forward and be so upset with the Fifield coverage from the New York Times that she would say, I'm going to make this very clear. Graham Platner raped me. And made it very, very, very clear. And that is, again, eventually with the really bad polling numbers, what toppled the last domino. Now the New York Times has additional problems. The New York Times is now running articles, and I'm not joking. In fact, I think we have this ready for B-roll up here on the screen. There's also other issues with Graham Platner. We'll get to those. The New York Times is running, quote, why some women in Maine are mourning the end of the Graham Platner campaign. Aww. Here's what, I mean, sure, he's kind of rapey and, the Nazi tattoo and the fraud and the faking his disability and like all these. But you know what's really, really sad? You know what just really gives him the grump? The women aren't getting their Graham anymore. And that's just real unfortunate. The New York Times is also under a lot of scrutiny for a couple of reasons here from the left and the right. The New York Times is trying to do kind of an Axios after Joe Biden kind of a thing. Like he's like sort of trying to say, well, I mean, Ro Khanna knew about all of this way earlier. And Platner called Ro Khanna to give him a heads up before the New York Times abuse story even launched. Remember how Ro Khanna got up in front of the country and said, I was surprised. I had no idea this was coming. Now the New York Times is throwing Ro Khanna of California under the bus. This is just a truly wonderful nightmare. And I wish all of the ire and the pain and the suffering in the world on the crew that thought they could get away with this. I really do. Now, of course, Dan Osborne struggling with this out in Nebraska because he's the guy that picked him and is now running for Bernie Sanders. The Democrats are outraged, however, over the DSA, and the DSA is outraged with Mamdani and his advisor, Morris Katz. So Morris Katz is a campaign official for Platner and an advisor to Mamdani. The Democratic Socialists are really, really angry because, again, we'll get to the DSA in a second here, they're really outraged because it just so happens Morris Katz, who was working for Platner and is now with Mamdani, well, he used to work for Summer Lee's campaign, and he was barred from her staff in 2022 because there's a bunch of reports of sexual misconduct from the former Summer Lee staffer who later became the Graham Platner guy. So not only is Graham Platner super duper rapey, he also happened to hire people who may have been rather rapey and who is still to this moment a Mamdani advisor. I love it.
Well, how the turntables.
Ain't it fun? Ain't it fun? It's almost as though when I told you explicitly and clearly that all of these Democratic Socialist candidates and staffers who say, we just want universal health care and universal housing, and also we just don't want genocide in Gaza, and I am a working class man of the people, that even though they all say that exact line, they're all phonies and they're all frauds and they're all fakes, as Victor Davis Hanson said very aptly on Laura Ingraham yesterday. And it gets worse because now Stu over at Fox, and a phenomenal job as well, has now leaked the Democrat Socialists of America's new platform. This is not hearsay. This is not some kind of AI generated. I mean, I don't know if he used AI in the graphic stuff here, but Stu's DSA report here has leaked from the inside. This is just truly incredible. Stu Smith has uncovered that for the Democratic Socialists of America, their new platform group. So they've announced their new platform, again, for all like the AOCs and the Zoran Mamdanis and all of these candidates in New York and Colorado. Here you go, boys and girls. They want to, quote, abolish the Senate. Get rid of the United States Senate entirely. Quote, implement proportional representation and ranked choice voting in all elections and abolish the Senate. Number 2, the DSA, in their official platform now, replace the president and the Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen by and subordinate to Congress, which again, just subordinate to the House of Representatives, who they also want to rig. They want to remake elections nationwide, abolish the Electoral College, replace the two-party system with a multi-party democracy, expand the House of Representatives, and implement proportional representation. Radio crew, we got way more on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Y'all take care. Whew, almost missed that one by a hair. So again, they want to rig the House of Representatives and say proportional representation and ranked choice voting in all elections, which mean, by the way, what this means, they want a jillion House of Representatives members from New York City and from LA and Seattle and nothing anywhere else. Seriously, that's how they want to rig it. And also the proportional representation includes illegal immigrants. So, because they want amnesty for all illegal immigrants, whether they've committed crimes or not, whether they're here illegally or not, here in the country, and to abolish ICE. This is their complete, clear platform. And then to abolish the presidency and the Supreme Court. So it is literally just to be a mob-ruled governance by the socialists. They are not hiding the ball whatsoever. And by the way, to be clear, this is just open communism. It is to seize the means of production, public ownership of major corporations, quote, establish public ownership of the largest corporations and essential industries to ensure democratic control and accountability to the people. To abolish the carceral state, to literally abolish police and prisons, all of them. Again, Zoran Mamdani is trying to close down Rikers Island right now. End sanctions on Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran, free Palestine, defund the Department of War completely, end all foreign wars and close overseas military bases. I mean, here you go, folks. And yeah, they're all fraudulent. And yeah, they're all insanely corrupt. And they've never worked a day in their lives. None of them. They're not farmers. They're not working in factories. They're a bunch of graduate school morons who sit around acting as though they deserve to rule over you if they just tell you, we will give you things. We'll give you stuff, I promise. And I understand that this appears to be a little sensational, and I may not be doing the best job of representing Stu Smith's phenomenal work on this. So here you go. This is the Fox initial coverage of their own Stu Smith.
Also back to...
Hang on. That's Rubio targeting Antifa. Do we actually? I think we have. I want to make sure that if there is a chance that we have it, that we roll it out. We may not actually have the full coverage for Stu Smith. We might try to find that here in a second, because Rubio's also, there's a lot of chaos regarding Rubio actually going after some of these Antifa socialist individuals. And I want to make sure that we cover some of that stuff as well. We might come back to this here in a little bit. Yes, the Rubio news is a little bit more urgent because the Washington Post is freaking out about Marco Rubio. So in the meantime, the Secretary of State has made a decision to convene a 60-nation conference. And this particular 60-nation conference is to gain the rest of the world's help and assistance in doing what? Well, tackling the different left-wing terror organizations who are trying to accomplish these exact things that were just outlined in Stu Smith's report. So here is the Marco Rubio statement earlier today. This is the Newsmax coverage of it, I believe.
Also back to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He is setting his sights on Antifa. He's inviting ministers from more than 60 countries to discuss the resurgence of transnational far-left terrorism that will happen next week in Washington. According to the Washington Post, the administration is weighing using counterterrorism tools and foreign terrorism labels for Antifa. The meeting is expected to bring together foreign and interior ministers from Europe, Latin America, and Asia.
Now, the Washington Post saw this, which, by the way, is a very, very good thing, and decided that this was truly the most evil and insane thing in the entire world. Give me just a second to see if my team can get this video on the NAS for you guys. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about the Washington Post coverage of this, because it is truly beautiful. I just wrote an article on this today over at the Daily Wire. The Washington Post threw up an entire piece suggesting that there's no Antifa. This is going to be terrible. It's going to be awful. Everything is over. We're done. First of all, there is no left-wing terrorism. The authors make it quite clear that even in the case of Luigi Mangione, who wrote a manifesto all about killing Brian Thompson, like as a socialist aim, the United Healthcare CEO, it just so happens that the Washington Post is saying, well, how would you even decide if that was left-wing terrorism? And they make the case that there is that actually this is just a way that Marco Rubio is going to use to target Democrats and end human rights, which is hilarious. And there are multiple cases, by the way, of various facilities here in the United States, a Texas ICE facility in which an Antifa cell numbering in the dozens on the 4th of July last year attempted to attack an ICE facility, a ton of bullet casings, engraved with Antifa slogans, of course, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. 3 Washington Post reporters spent hundreds of words this week arguing that no one can quite figure out what left-wing terrorism is. And this is the best part. They claim that a bunch of European countries told them anonymously that there was no Antifa anywhere in Europe, and they don't even know what it is. They have no idea. According to one European diplomat on an anonymous comment, says, quote, "We don't have Antifa. We don't even know what it means." Here's what's really funny, though. The State Department, as well as the European Union, noted just last year that Antifa Ost, Antifa OST, a militant group in Germany with 2 more cells in Greece and 1 operating in Italy, were considered a foreign terrorist organization operating to overthrow huge parts of the EU. So in the same article of the Washington Post's coverage of this blisteringly insane, bonkers nonsense, Rubio simply targeting Antifa has all of those on the left in complete and full and open panic. Because if the Secretary of State is able to utilize international cooperation, as we've already seen in targeting violent, militant, communist and socialist groups around the world, then you could get elections like they had in Argentina with Milei, or in El Salvador with Bukele, or like we just saw in Colombia. If you have states and nation groups around the world that begin targeting Islamist terrorist groups and socialist Marxist groups, it might in fact reveal that some of those nations might be taking funds from China, like Neville Roy Singham's group, which operates Code Pink in an attempt to try to blockade run Cuba. Oh yeah, Cuba is now in its last week undergoing a second power outage. The age of the left hiding who they are and to try to kind of operate behind the scenes while kind of the corporatist technocracy in the Democratic Party kind of covers for them, it's over. Because they're now Julius Caesaring Chuck Schumer and everybody else who even remotely disagrees with them. And they're taking off their mask proudly and saying, yeah, nationalize everything, seize the means of production, tear down the United States, abolish the Senate, abolish the Supreme Court, abolish the presidency, rig the House. Truly incredible. You have Ilhan Omar demanding that the Constitution be permanently amended. Thanks to producer Jen, we do actually have this particular clip here. I'm bewildered that they thought that we wouldn't find this kind of stuff out eventually. Here you go.
Who is representing people of America on the Hill? They want to eliminate the U.S. Senate. They want to replace the president and the U.S. Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen by a subordinate to Congress. They want amnesty for all immigrants. And they want to defund the Department of War.
This is according to a source inside the DSA.
Yeah, but the main point is that there was this massive talking point that this is just liberal states and, liberal districts where this has happened. I'm sorry. This is happening all across the country. And they have some platforms that a lot of young people and a lot of people that have grievances with the rich are going with.
But that's the funny thing, because again, those who are echoing these grievances are all wildly rich. They don't work any kind of a job, but they're in several millionaire houses. This is again why Abdul El Sayed, the Democrat possible for the Senate, who's again running up against Congresswoman Haley Stevens now because McMorrow has dropped out up there. He's under fire from, again, even people like Mehdi Hasan. Again, it's so bizarre to see them eating their own right now, because these Democrat socialists and these radicals, they'll go out there and they'll tell you, oh, hey, I'm just like you, and I have no money, and I'm poor, and I hate the billionaires, and I'm a working man, or I'm like educated, and I'm just a friendly neighborhood kind of doctor. And then you have, again, some of the other part of the left that's going, wait, that's not true at all. You're not pure in the ideology. You have lots of money. You're a millionaire. What are you doing saying that you are just a regular run-of-the-mill worker? Here was Mehdi Hasan again yesterday with Abdul El Sayed.
Haley Stevens has also attacked you and Mike Rogers for being millionaires, who she says conveniently did not file their 2026 personal financial disclosures. You've sought an extension through August 13th, I believe, which is after the primary. Was this to avoid transparency with your voters? Why not release them before the election?
No, it's just taxes get complicated.
It's just taxes are complicated, and my wife probably makes money. I don't know. I mean, I don't consider me a billionaire. Also, he likes to parade around how he's doctor. Call me Dr. Abdul El Sayed because I completed my graduate programs, you know. He doesn't have a medical license. And it's wild to watch him get called out. I missed this clip yesterday, but it's relevant today, so.
You got attacked by your rivals for calling yourself a physician, not just a doctor, even though you don't have a valid state medical license in New York or Michigan, which apparently is what you need legally to call yourself a physician.
Why does this matter? So on my bio, for example, I'm a former teacher and administrator. I am not in the classroom. I have not been in the classroom since, well, I wouldn't even say when I was an administrator, I wasn't a teacher. So since like 2020, I haven't been in the classroom itself. Now, I've been in a ton of classrooms as an administrator, but I'm a former teacher. I don't currently call myself a teacher and a professor and a phenomenal, beautiful, handsome young man, no matter what some of you might say about me. Anywho, so that's what he's being called out for. You're like, I'm a physician in theory. I have a theoretical degree in physics kind of crap.
Do you wish you'd just stuck to calling yourself a doctor, which you are, to avoid all of this controversy and attacks on your physician status?
You know, at the end of the day, it's not about whether or not I'm a physician or a doctor. The question is, can you see a doctor? It's not about my education. It's about whether or not your kid gets a good education.
It's not about whether I lied. It's about whether you get free stuff. That's seriously his argument. At the end of the day, it's not whether or not you can call me doctor. It's whether your kids can call themselves a doctor and get an education.
So bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
It's a wild time. It's a wild time. It truly is. It is bizarre to watch right now. According to a Politico article, Southern black leaders, and I quote, Southern black leaders warn that their power is currently on the line. They're starting to lose momentum. And the Democrats have abandoned them completely because they're chasing the socialism and the Islamic thing. Remember the age of like Southern black churches where you would have new Democrats enter the party who would kind of try to talk as though they were kind of like a civil rights era preacher? Kind of like what's his name? The guy who's now been booted out of Congress in that primary, Al Franken. Like, his dastardly deeds undone. That kind of a way that you speak. They're being tossed aside. They're old news, man. They're getting tossed. And sorry, pretty soon you won't have to go actually out there and campaign in black churches. If they need a Christian, they'll talk it up to, heretic James Tallarico. Beautiful stuff. And before we get into this story and a couple of others, I did want a chance to talk about some of the other things that they're still going in on, because they may be leaving the race card behind. But what Abdul El Sayed and then many of the other DSA folks are trying to suggest is that they're just going to defy the Supreme Court, defy the United States Congress, and defy anyone at all. Title IX as well with the Department of Education. And they will keep LGBTQ plus 2IA as long as they can. So like primarily their number one group for the DSA is just the Queers for Palestine group. That is where they're going all in all the time. And again, playing this in this midterm is wild to me. Because you know that males have inherent athletic advantages over females. And no student or teacher around the country, no matter how desperately public schools or state lawmakers are really trying to impress you for a future campaign, no one should be punished for recognizing that truth. The Supreme Court knows it too. Again, we've talked about this at length. The Supreme Court's ruled under both the U.S. Constitution and federal law, states are free to protect female athletes. That means girls can compete on a level playing field in 27 states. Now, one of the things Americans have to fight for, are that those 23 remaining states, even if it's against their will, move to protect women, because that is far more important than the campaigns of some of these fools running for office. Really important for girls like, for example, Callie Keeler, a high school wrestler in Washington who was sexually assaulted by a male during the middle of a competition. Of course, we've interviewed Peyton McNabb, the volleyball player who was maimed by a young man dressed up as a girl, spiking the volleyball directly into her face. No female should have to experience what those ladies did. I recommend, again, huge sponsor of the show. We love them dearly, the Alliance Defending Freedom. Sign their petition to protect female sports. This has to be at the top of mind for a lot of candidates who get very kind of wishy-washy this time of year. Visit joinadf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848. Add your name alongside mine to this declaration. Side with truth and fairness. Again, we love the ADF. We're thankful they sponsor the show. This is the fight. And this law firm is, doing quite a bit, because some of these Supreme Court cases that are getting passed just so happen to have been fought tooth and nail by groups like the ADF. So again, joinadf.com/Tony or text Tony to 83848. Okay, now let's talk about this Politico article just a bit more, because one of you sent this in to me, and I want to do my due diligence here and share with you a little bit about what's going on. Black lawmakers and activists, this is according to Politico, in the Deep South argue they have been abandoned by the Democratic Party to fight an existential crisis on their own. They say they've been let down by nearly all corners of the party. Would-be presidential hopefuls who have flocked to early and swing states but don't bring their megaphones elsewhere, meaning they have a lot of heart and they talk a big game, but once they actually get to the states where these black leaders are, all of a sudden they're not showing up to marches. Oh, no. They're not actually doing anything. It's just performative. Like Graham Platner and Abdul Al-Sayed. And remember, Bernie Sanders, the civil rights kind of a guy. Oh, shock. Nope, no longer. Congressional leadership's focused on majority-making battlegrounds, that means Texas, while safe black seats are drawn out, and years of chronic underfunding that has allowed the local party apparatus to wither away. So that last line is not true. Although they allege that the reason that no one wants to join the Democratic Party and kind of like the civil rights era as young black individuals, they say that's because there's not enough money going into it to keep those clubs alive. The real answer is that there's nothing inspiring for the black youth of this country to get involved in the Democratic Party. Because all the Democratic Party tells them is you are stupid, you are poor, you have no idea how to register to vote, you couldn't possibly own voter ID. In fact, you'll have people like Kathy Hochul saying you don't even know what a computer is. Man, I can't wait. Sign me up. Incredible stuff. There's also some educational data there and the things that are kind of sweeping through the community. And that, for example, there are huge school choice movements among black communities in Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. And it turns out that young black men and women who are graduating from private and charter schools that are able to actually get access to some of these institutions for the first time because of school choice laws passing, they're not choosing to be Democrats. Funny, just amazing how some of that stuff works out. Anywho, quote, the feeling of neglect is compounding what the lawmakers called a crisis for black representation already underway in the wake of Louisiana versus Calais, the April Supreme Court decision that took aim at the VRA. That's, again, this Barack and Joe Biden scheme that in the last days in office, one of the guys holding Biden strings tried to tweet into constitutional amendment realism. What actually matters here in this personal and particular study is that there are a bunch of black leaders in the South that are very angry that James Tallarico is getting the money. I'm not kidding. So Jasmine Crockett, the lady who grew up in a St. Louis private school and yet talks like she's trying to do a poor imitation of the movie Friday. When she's out there asking questions and stuff and like changing her accent every single week. Well, after she lost her primary to James Tallarico, she has since consistently just thrown down her hands and cried, "This is all racist and stuff." And a lot of black leaders in the South in the Democratic Party agree. But the Democrats aren't trying to keep any of those seats. They're funding James Tallarico. And this leads to an interesting question that I got today, because there's a huge news article that's running around. Oh, hey, James Tallarico is raising all of this money. In fact, so far in this particular election cycle, according to Occupy Democrats, history made, breaking. Texas Senate candidate James Tallarico racks up a jaw-dropping $30 million in fundraising. The largest Q2 haul ever for a U.S. Senate race. And they're saying that in comparison, Ken Paxton has only raised $9 or $10 million. I'm not joking. I went to go through some of the earlier stuff because I thought, I've heard this before. I've heard that the Democrat Senate candidate in Texas, who's so popular with the ladies and the Christians, he's earning all this money. July 13th, 2018. Beto O'Rourke raises $10.4 million in July, or in the last couple of months, beating Ted Cruz, essentially tripling Ted Cruz's fundraising in the same period. Man, how did Beto O'Rourke, by the way, the end of the election, are you ready for this? According to Houston Public Media, it's a PBS outlet, O'Rourke raises $38.1 million, tripling Ted Cruz. He had over 800,000 donors, the Occupy Democrats post here, from over 780,000 individual contributors. Wow. Incredible. Wow. Remember Kamala Harris? She's wildly outspending Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton, wildly outspending Donald Trump. I thought that money bought elections. Wait a second. Hang on. Graham Platner told me billionaires buy elections. So why did Tom Steyer, who spent oodles, canoodles, and toaster strudels of Scrooge McDuck's bank account, lose his primary in California? And why did Beto lose? Wait a minute. Colin Allred also outspent. He's a former Tennessee Titan. Wow, he outspent that. Why is all this happening? I've heard this stuff before. Now, there's one other question that I was asked by a watcher of the show, was kind of curious and said, wait a minute, I thought that you said, Tony, the Democratic Party, the DNC, was broke and they are in debt. Correct. In the United States, currently, even though the Supreme Court ruled that you can coordinate between campaign and the actual party itself, the DNC's account and then the candidate's account are two different things. Two different things. So the DNC can spend money places, but people don't just donate to the DNC itself. So when the DNC spent $70 million in Virginia to try to, just to end up getting the Supreme Court of that Commonwealth overturning their little blue redistricting thing, because they're stupid. The DNC spent that. That wasn't Abigail Spanberger's campaign. That wasn't a House or a Senate race's campaign. Here in Texas, people are donating to James Tallarico. But Act Blue, and what's actually going to the DNC itself, that's still dry. They're two separate bank accounts. Now, here's also a little fun fact. If I agreed today, let's say that for some reason, I don't know why, I decided to run for Congress, God forbid, and I run for Indiana's 6th Congressional, and for whatever reason, I rack up a lot of debt. We're talking the kind of debt that would have Dave Ramsey going, what are you doing? We're talking full-on, extra bald, angry bridge nose pinching moment. Beans and rice, rice and beans kind of stuff. The Indiana Republican Party, depending on the filing rules federally, if I ran for Congress, technically the Republican Party could pick it up. They could take on that debt if I racked up a lot of debt. So if Tallarico, but you don't also necessarily get to keep the campaign. Sometimes the candidate gets to keep the campaign funding. Sometimes the state Democratic Party will keep some of the campaign funding. But if James Tallarico runs and they spend all of this money, because they'll spend every cent of this money in this race, that doesn't magically save the DNC from debt. But let's say that it did. I'm not sure on how the Federal Election Commission, right now, I'm looking this up for y'all. I'm not sure how the Federal Election Commission requires campaign funding raised for candidates to go back through and spend money to cover prior debts before that campaign, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, can then spend money on Tallarico again. But I do know this is why the Democrats have Act Blue. So Act Blue, the right has Win Red. Act Blue is this funding website where you go and enter in some of your information. They're in trouble right now because they took foreign money, and they're like, we didn't think to ask if you were foreign. Then Act Blue takes the money and then assigns it to campaigns so that the DNC, who's really, really in debt, doesn't have to cover its debts before it gives money to the campaigner. Who told me that? A member inside the DNC. I'm getting more use for that inside connection every single day. What a magical time to be in politics. It's wonderful. So, interesting times indeed. Now, I do want to get into a little bit of mail time, and this will bring us to our coverage of the ICE shooting of Lorenzo Salgado Araujo down in Texas. But the mail time questions asking about it, it kind of sort of floats it that way. So I'm giving you guys the credit for asking for updates on this because I wasn't necessarily planning on going into a ton of detail until you guys demanded it. So here's to y'all.
Mail time.
Mail time.
Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Okay, you guys have asked several of you. From Royce Solberg to John S., just all kinds of questions, and several of the channels on the Discord say, Tony, what is going on with this Texas shooting? So we have actually done a little extra work this afternoon, though we be extra busy. Here is the details that we know right now. According to the official reporting that has not yet been disputed or altered, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, this individual who has been in the country for several decades, over 25 years, as an illegal immigrant. He came here illegally. He evaded federal law enforcement. He did not seek to become a citizen of the United States and did not have an active visa. This individual made the decision when approached by federal law enforcement to get into his car and drive away. And in doing so, hit a law enforcement vehicle, making it a hit and run situation. Now, again, that brings us over to some of the other details. He allegedly ignored commands, struck an ICE vehicle, and then backed up and tried to run over a law enforcement officer and a federal law enforcement officer with his van. The officer fired in self-defense, which struck Araujo in the abdomen, and then he later died at the hospital. Now, today we're getting all of the videos. So first of all, you have Democratic representatives who are like Sylvia Garcia, who is definitely retarded, who says the person to blame here is ICE. Why? Because even a kid watching movies will tell you you should shoot out the tires.
So we have learned some lessons. Apparently, ICE has learned nothing. If they really think that a car is going to hurt somebody, I mean, even a kid would tell you, you shoot the tires.
Oh, you shoot the tires. If you shoot the tires, then Newton's first law of inertia just evaporates and the car just stops right then and there. Oh, that's very, very... I just got to check one thing here. No one could possibly get hurt by a moving vehicle. So far in this year, for just the month of April 2026, there were over 3,000 individuals in the United States who died by being run over by a vehicle, being hit by a vehicle, a pedestrian situation. In March, it was 3,160. In February, 2,900. And then January of this year, 2,670. And that's as far as the preliminary motor vehicle death estimates in this year are currently reported. Again, why point that out? To get out there as a congresswoman and say, well, you just shoot the tires, and I don't know. Why would anyone think that a vehicle is threatening to you? Because vehicles kill people. Sylvia Garcia, stupid. Just incredibly stupid. Houston Mayor John Whitmire, who's also a piece of work. He's a lifelong Democrat, served as a state lawmaker as well. He is an interesting character. He got out and did the whole sob story. Again, the investigation is not concluded at all at this point.
80 hours ago,
the Salgado family, life will never be the same. At no fault of theirs, Mr. Salgado was chased by an unmarked vehicles.
Is that how it started? Like, is that how it started? He was just chased by unmarked vehicles. Like Kevin McAllister, he's just walking home, and all of a sudden, Harry and Marv spin the vehicle around and start following him, and Kevin escapes him by pretending to be a shepherd in the nativity scene at the church. Like, are you really trying to pass this one? Really?
Before he could identify himself and speak as a Houstonian, he was shot and killed.
What was he doing when he was shot and killed?
I've met with his family today and expressed the entire city's condolences and anger, and assured him that I and the levels of government represented here today.
Oh, speak faster, please.
And the DA's office would do everything.
Everything.
Use all of our resources and our waking hours.
Not our sleeping hours.
To pursue an independent and transparent investigation.
Man loves being on camera. Now, again, you've already heard an unmarked. He was chased by unmarked mystery men. No one even could have known who this person was. I just found this picture is being shared all over online, including from Democrat lawmakers who are trying to find the identity of the ICE agent that they say shot him. Now, here's some fun stuff, folks. What do you notice about this ICE officer here? What do you notice? Go ahead. First thing here, if you're watching, if you're listening, I will describe the image to you. He is wearing a plate carrier that on the front in yellow lettering says Police ICE. And then at the upper right-hand corner is an actual Immigration Customs Enforcement federal law enforcement badge, like other ICE agents wearing. I was told, unmarked, and no one had any idea. So wait a minute, I'm confused. There's kind of several things here. So I'm told first of all, he was pursued by unmarked vehicles. And then, for some reason, he gets out of his I'm guessing he gets into a vehicle, and that would allow this individual to walk up, because someone's got to be holding the camera inside the car to take a picture of this individual. Somehow, somewhere. We're not just, Hondas aren't all of a sudden putting seatbelt cameras in cars, not yet anyway. So now there's officers on foot. And then again, as the official record shows, and we have some kind of the aftermath situations where the vehicle and the crashing, this guy did try to run at least this individual over, who ended up taking self-defensive steps to fire upon the individual trying to hit. This is not as though this happened in 30 seconds. Just like the Renee Good and the Alex Preddy shootings did not happen in just 30 seconds. Oh, it was quick and it's here and it was gone. Wow. Nope. Now, I don't know all of the ins and outs of this investigation. No one does, because the investigation's already ongoing. There's already investigation happening right here and now. But the stories and the sob stories of, oh, wow, it was just happenstance, just so happened to be, oh, man, seems like not true whatsoever. Again, based on the fundamental circumstances regarding the information that we have present based on photographs and based on videos. Now, Tom Homan, just like the Renee Good situation, just like the Alex Preddy situation, unlike Kristi Noem, who got out and ran her mouth, Tom Homan has the same head on his shoulders that he did last time. And good on him, because this is the right response. They're like, any updates, anything on it?
Happened in Minnesota with the shovel, and then now, what happened in Houston? What can you tell us about that? And also,
look, I'm not going to comment on an ongoing investigation. In the first shooting with Renee Good, I was asked that same day about it. We got to let the investigation play out. And the credibility of ICE, what happened to that dude? He was indicted. So if our agents violate policy, they violate the law, if we find that out through the investigation, the U.S. attorney there took quick action, and they'll be dealt with. And then we're going to hold our officers to high standard. But we got to wait for the investigation to play out, because who knows, is there body cam footage? Is there cell phone videos? Like what happened in Minnesota, there was actually a city camera captured something. So let the investigation play out. If the officers acted outside policy or illegally, they'll be held accountable.
Wow, what a concept. Now, we do actually have one lawmaker getting extra stupid, because again, we're just going to go ahead and lie apparently now about all of the details surrounding all of it. So earlier, I can't remember the individual that I had said was the Democrat official who had said this, but Mr. Dastardly Deeds. That's Democrat Representative Al Green, who lost his primary. I don't quite remember which name I'd said at the time, but Al Green, he's come out with a statement now, and it's just awful and wrong and stupid, and here you go.
Mr. Araujo belongs to us. He belongs to the Constitution of the United States of America.
No. See, the cool thing here, I know this is amazing. When you become a citizen, you take this really neat thing called an oath. And you do swear an oath that puts your allegiance to the United States and its Constitution, to agree to serve under the laws governed thereby. And what Al Green is saying here is that, well, that this guy, even though, again, he was illegal, he chose not to get citizenship in the United States. Well, I mean, clearly, he's the same Constitution that you and me, it owns him, which also, just weird.
That Constitution applies to him just as it applies to me.
It does not. There are different classifications.
He should not receive any less attention from the Constitution that I or any of you would receive.
No, he did receive less attention from the Constitution. I'm so tired of that. Democrats believe, for some ultimately retarded reason, that your citizenship gives you a ton of privileges but no responsibility. That is not true. We have known this all the way since back in Roman times. Paul the Apostle made this clear, that as a citizen of Rome, not only did he enjoy certain privileges, but he had certain responsibilities. Now, the most obvious responsibility that you and I can think of as citizens of this United States that we have as an obligation is to sign up for selective service, for the draft. If the draft is ever called up, you have a responsibility as a citizen to fight for this country. You do. That is a core responsibility of being a citizen. It is. And to be clear, also there is an element of, yes, it is a responsibility of yours to pay taxes that are due from you to the federal government. Even if we consider a lot of those taxes to be theft and not moral, you still have that responsibility. You do. You don't have rights alone here in this country. You have a series of responsibilities, things that are expected of you, because otherwise being a citizen means nothing. That is why the idea that everyone's a citizen is ridiculous, because not everyone has the capacity internally to be a citizen, nor should people who do not want to have responsibilities, nor should they be forced to be citizens. It's the issue with people being residents of Washington, D.C., for instance, because you are not supposed to have taxation without representation. And so people in Washington, D.C. don't pay federal taxes, nor should they have to, by the way. But also that's why I think people should not be legally allowed, unless they are members of the presidential administration, to be actual citizens of Washington, D.C. I think that's unconstitutional, but that's another federal case for another conversation about precedent.
He belongs to us. He's in our jurisdiction. We have a duty and a responsibility, in fact, an obligation, to bring justice to this cause.
Okay, so last bit, and I see one of the comments, and I was actually just getting to this. So Araujo was not under a removal order or a criminal warrant. He was just under a warrant for administrative detention. Like, that may be an issue. No. There is no federal law that says you are only allowed to detain those who have committed a crime. There's no law. Please, show me the law. This is the same group of people who tell you that violating the immigration laws of this country are only civil offenses. If you commit a civil offense here in this country, and you do nothing about it, you don't submit to the authorities about that civil infraction, it becomes a criminal infraction. You don't just get to ignore civil infractions, whenever you want, and it's fine. That's not how that works. Please quit pretending to not understand things. Federal law enforcement has the authority to tell you to stop and ask you questions. They do. That has been confirmed by the Supreme Court of the United States and by each and every federal district in this country, time and time and time and time again. You don't have the right to just tell the FBI or Immigration Customs Enforcement to beat it and you don't have to show them your documents. That's not a thing. It was reiterated and reconfirmed with the Patriot Act, but even before then, the federal government has always had the right to enforce immigration law. They do. You don't like it? Tough. Congress can change the law. And if you run from federal law enforcement, when they're like, I would like to see if you are in fact here legally as a citizen of the United States, and you say, no, I don't have to do nothing, and you run away, and then you get in your car and you try to hit one of them, and they shoot in self-defense, guess what? That's an FA in which you FO'd. There's nothing else to it. There is nothing else to it at all. Whether or not the person is wonderful, whether or not the person is just the most joyous and amazing person of all times, if you violate the law, there are, in fact, consequences. Excellent point made by James here in this case. He said, you don't pay a parking ticket, depending on the kind here, and, see what they'll do to your driving privilege. No, ICE does not need probable cause. I see that claim. No, they don't. They do not need probable cause. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. You show me the federal law that says Immigration Customs Enforcement needs probable cause in order to stop and say, hey, and again, with this individual, with the guy not being a citizen, that's probable cause. The idea that they have to have a Wild West sketch of you, we're looking for Dirty Dan, and they have to, that's how they have to find you. Guys, that's not a thing. And probable cause already exists in the fact, just if the police happen upon you doing crack cocaine and they open your car door because they think that you're just sitting there and you're blocking traffic, or even if there is an officer walking by your car, no probable cause, just kind of walking out there and all of a sudden he smells burnt plastic and it's like, oh, hey, you're smoking crack. He doesn't say, wait a minute, do I have probable cause? That's not a thing. Don't make up rules as though federal law enforcement for some reason has this special series of standards that it has to follow. No, immigration law is already set by Congress. That's one of the reasons why the left wants to remove administrative stay warrants. ICE already has an administrative stay on this guy because he's here illegally. No. Yeah, I'm sorry to those who disagree. I'm afraid that we'll just have to disagree on this one because U.S. immigration law is very, very, very clear, and it's one of the reasons why 18 U.S. Code 1357. All right, I'll play along. An officer, powers without warrant. Any officer or employee of the service authorized under regulations prescribed by the Attorney General shall have the power without warrant to interrogate any alien or person believed to be an alien as to his right to be in the United States. That's literally number one. Any person believed to be an alien. If they thought, that guy is an illegal alien, that literally Section 1A in U.S. Code, 8 U.S. Code, Section 1357, powers of immigration officers and employees. Section A, number one, to interrogate any alien. That would include Araujo or person believed to be an alien as his right to remain in the United States without a warrant. That's what it says. That's the rules. Mail time's a fun time for this because, there's a little time for some conversation here, there, and everywhere. And I'm sorry that I don't always explain things, but again, the actual U.S. Code, the very first point says, Immigration Customs Enforcement absolutely has the right, if they suspect you might be an illegal immigrant, to stop and ask you questions. And with that, I think we can wrap up an excellent show, an excellent week of shows for this week. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We'll catch you guys on Monday. Same great time, same great place, 7 p.m. Eastern. Like and subscribe, and as always, take care.